Welcome to the Franchise Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Jason Revere. So, got something embarrassing to share with you. Yesterday, I was going to get a jump on recording this podcast, get it out a day earlier than I had planned on, and, regale my many listeners with the brilliance that comes out of this podcast just a little bit earlier. And so, I wanted to also improve the audio quality, so I got this new program set up here. It's a web-based platform, podcast recording platform, and hit record. Everything seemed to be working just fine, so went about my podcast like I do. Hit stop at the end of my rants. Went to listen to it, and wouldn't you know it, it didn't record anything. So I sat here for about 45 minutes, talking to myself in my office like an absolute psychopath. How embarrassing, right? But we're going to recover. We're back at it today. This will work. I'm back to the old way of doing it. So I know this is going to work. So thank you for joining us today on the show. And today we're going to dive into a list. Who likes lists, right? Who doesn't like it? Who doesn't like a list? Lists are great. It's our way of ranking things, right? That's how we're going to rank things. And everybody likes a ranking, right? We look up lists all the time. I think men do this more often than ladies do. We like lists, right? Best athlete. Who's the best basketball player ever? And who's the richest person in the world? The Forbes magazine publishes the list of the richest billionaires in the world. We all like to see those lists. Top musicians, if you're into music, who's the best guitar player ever, who's the best rock drummer of all time, etc. Right? We love these lists. AFI's top 100 movies, and Watch Mojo. Heck, there's an entire YouTube channel dedicated to lists and ranking things. And we're fascinated by it. We love it. And so today we're going to talk about a list that's in the franchise world, and it's probably the most well-known ranking of the franchises that are available, and it's published annually by Entrepreneur Magazine. And this is their 45th year doing it. They call it the Franchise 500. Right? They rank the top 500 franchises in America that are available for investors to get into. So we're going to dissect that list today. We're going to talk a little bit about what goes into creating that list, and I'm going to provide to you some tips and tricks how to use that list properly to guide you throughout your franchise discovery process and finding that right franchise for you. And really what this list really is, what it boils down to, is this is the franchise industry's senior superlatives. Right? You remember that when you were in high school, the senior superlatives would come out every year, and it'd kind of rank the seniors, right? It would usually just award one or two people things like most likely to succeed, best looking. I bet you they've done away with that one, but that was a category when I was in high school. Prettiest eyes, best hair, most athletic. Right? Who doesn't like that one? And they would publish these things, and everybody would get all excited about it. Everybody wanted to be on that list, right? Because it's like, oh man, well, most likely to succeed. That's pretty cool, right? Best looking. My goodness, could you imagine being best looking? I can't. And they put those lists out in high school, and everybody gravitates towards it. It gives us talking points for a day or two. And if you're on the list, heck, maybe you'll brag about it for the rest of the time, right? Maybe that'll be like your Al Bundy moment. Right? If you remember Married with Children, I scored 5 touchdowns in a single game. That could be your moment. I got best hair in high school. Now I'm bald. But you can look back on those senior superlatives with fond memories. But the Franchise 500, let's get back on track here. The Franchise 500, it comes out every year in January, and it's ranking the top franchise opportunities as seen through the eyes of the publishers of Entrepreneur Magazine. Now, obviously, there's going to be 500 of them on there. And a lot of people that are looking at buying a franchise, they really get wooed by that. They see those rankings, they go through the rankings, especially astute franchise buyers or people who have subscribed to Entrepreneur Magazine. They've got a business savvy mind. They're going to look at those lists, and it's going to likely influence a lot of people. I mean, they have a tremendous circulation, and a lot of online presence. And so they're going to look at these lists and think to themselves, wow, look at that. number one, number two, number three. Well, these are, I could get involved with a franchise that's on the top of this list. And so, but before we do that, I think it's a really good idea to understand what goes into creating these lists in the first place, right? Well, how do these people at Entrepreneur Magazine even come up with these rankings? And so we're going to start there. Okay. We're going to start there. We're going to figure out, how do these 500 franchises get put onto this list, and how do they piecemeal them together, ranking them in a 1 to 500? It's not just, hey, these are 500 good franchises. They are publishing it saying, this is the number 1 franchise out there. This is the number 2 franchise, 3, etc. And so, first off, we need to understand, how does even a franchise get noticed to get placed in the vicinity of the list, let alone on the list? So we'll start there. The way that a franchise gets considered is an application process. Okay, it's not just like they are a franchise that exists and we're going to research all of the franchises. Listen, there's like 4,000 franchises out there. Maybe some estimates show as many as 5,000 different franchises that are available. That's a lot of data to sift through. If they were just going to do this purely on they exist, so we're gonna figure out if they should end up on our top 500 rankings. So we got to start there. They have to apply. The franchisor themselves must apply to be considered for this ranking. The application process is pretty simple. You get onto entrepreneur.com, you click a tab, open it up. It's a small application on there that gets the conversation started. You get a free listing to get put on there. And once you're on there, then you're encouraged to apply to be on the Franchise 500. Once you apply to be on the Franchise 500, there is a fee to do so. I think it's fairly nominal. I think it's a couple $100 to apply to get on there. Once you apply to get on there, that's when you have to submit your FDD, which is in the industry that's a pretty well-known thing, but you might not know what that is, so I'll describe that to you. The FDD stands for the Franchise Disclosure Document. Okay, the franchise industry is heavily regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, and they all have to play by the same rules. One of those rules is they have to publish a franchise disclosure document. It's going to detail all of the things that go into buying that franchise, the initial investment, potential revenues, ongoing expenses, closures and opening of new franchises, any litigation that the franchisor is in, bankruptcies that the franchisor has experienced, and a bevy of other things, the do's, the cans, the won'ts, will nots, etc. All of that's going to be in there in that document. So each one of these franchises that applies to be considered on the Franchise 500 must submit their FDD to the folks at Entrepreneur Magazine. They also have to submit a list of existing locations. So they have to provide a list of all of the existing locations, so the people at Entrepreneur can vet to make sure that the numbers are adding up. They're lining up with what's published in the FDD. So it starts there. Application process is done. That's when Entrepreneur Magazine plugs in what they call their proprietary ranking system that they've developed over the 45 years that this list has been in existence. And so they plug all these data points in. And so we're going to go through what those data points are. Costs and fees. That's the very first one. The costs and fees. I don't have any idea how they consider what a good cost is versus a bad cost. I have no idea what that means, but that's part of their ranking, is the costs and fees. Up next, the second one is going to be size of the franchisor and the growth trajectory that the franchisor is on. That's part of the equation. Up next is the support that they provide. We'll circle back to that here in a minute. The support that they provide. Brand strength is another one. Again, sounds kind of subjective, but that is a data point that they plug in to figure out if they should be on the list and where they should rank. And then the next one is going to be financial strength. But I want to make sure that we all understand what that means. Okay, financial strength does not mean the strength of the financial capabilities from the franchisee's perspective. Okay, the costs and fees, that's from the franchisee's perspective because they are going to be the ones shelling out the dough to open up that business. The financial strength does not refer to the strength of the franchisee's locations. What that means is the financial strength of the franchisor entity that owns the franchise system. In that FDD, every franchise has to provide audited financial statements that meet GAAP standards, which I don't want to get too technical here or boring, but they have to be audited by an accredited CPA that is educated in the franchising industry, because the way you calculate revenues is very different in a franchise system than you would in any other type of business. So they have to meet those standards. They publish their P&Ls. I think they got to go back like 3 years. Their P&Ls and their balance sheets. Okay, so they're going to publish all of this data in there. That's the financial strength that this list, that these rankings are going to be based off of on Entrepreneur Magazine. The financial strength of the parent entity that owns the franchisor. Okay, which is that, by the way, that is an important, it sounds like I'm kind of poo-pooing it here. That is a very important metric that you want to look at when vetting a franchise, because you don't want your franchisor to go bankrupt, do you? No, of course not. You don't want them to run out of money, because then they're going to be, when they run out of money, they run out of support. When they run out of support, people start going out of business. People start going out of business, it's a house of cards. The whole thing falls apart. So they've got to be very financially strong in order to exist as a franchise entity. So that one makes a lot of sense. Okay, and that's an objective thing to look at, right? You're going to look at the P&L and the balance sheet. You're going to know exactly where that franchisor stands financially. So we're going to go backwards in order and kind of just dissect each one of them. So financial strength, objective, easy to understand, boom. Up next, brand strength. Like I said earlier, how do we quantify brand strength? What does it even mean? Brand strength. Isn't that very subjective? Isn't that in the eye of the beholder? And brand strength to me sounds too subjective to plug thousands of franchisors into to figure out a ranking based on a data point that is subjective. So I'm not here to poop on the Franchise 500 list by any stretch of the imagination, but we do need to understand what goes into it. So the brand strength sounds a little kind of out there, right? Not really easy to quantify. Up next is support. Again, support. How do we quantify support? Are they calling every franchisee and asking them individually, hey, how's the support? You feel supported by your franchisor? You think they're really doing that? I will tell you firsthand, they do not do that. So how do they quantify support? I don't know. Okay, I don't know. I've listened to multiple interviews with the people who put this together. I still don't really totally understand how they quantify support. It works for them. It is what it is. But keep that in mind when looking at this list. Size and growth. Very easy to figure out, right? That's an objective data point. You have this many franchisees. Last year, you sold this many franchise locations, so now you have this many. That's a growth trajectory of X. Very easy to quantify and a valuable metric to put into any ranking system. Costs and fees. Now, yes, this is objective. We know what the costs and fees are, but how do we know that they're good? How do we know that it makes sense? How do we know that they're not ripping off franchisees? Maybe they're charging too much for the initial franchise fee. I doubt it. By the way, most franchisors out there earn every dime of their franchise fee, because you're going to pay like 60 grand, they all have 50 to 60 grand on average to get the keys to a potential multi-million-dollar business. Sounds like kind of a no-brainer, but for the most part, they're going to be lined up just fine. But again, how do we quantify that in relation to another franchise? That's what I'm not really understanding about how they're going to plug these data points in. And I'll give you some concrete examples here in a moment when we go through the top 10 list. But understand that these are the 5 criteria that Entrepreneur Magazine uses to determine who should end up ranked on their top 500 list. Okay? Let's talk about some things that they don't include that I think from your point of view, if you're looking at buying a franchise, might be of importance to you. Let's start with lifestyle. I don't see lifestyle written anywhere on this the criteria here. Lifestyle is not on there anywhere. Wouldn't that be something that you would want to take into consideration when making an investment of opening up a business and pouring your life savings into something, doing something you've never done before to create wealth and or lifestyle freedom for yourself? The lifestyle might be one of the most important things you'd want to take into consideration. It's not on there. Okay? Again, it's neither bad nor good, just making a statement that it is not written on there. And I'll tell you actually firsthand. So the franchise that's at number 4 on the list is a franchise that I've known a handful of people who own this franchise, and they're not super pumped about the lifestyle that they have. Sure, they make money. They make decent money at doing it, but the lifestyle to them has not been conducive to what they were hoping. It hasn't given them the lifestyle that they were seeking when stepping out into business ownership for themselves. Just food for thought, but it is what it is. All right. Another criteria that I don't really see on here is financial return from the franchisee's perspective. There's 2 numbers that have to go into consideration when looking at the investment. Right, the dollars that you're going to be plugging in is part of that equation. The other part of the equation that helps you to determine if it is worth doing is going to be that financial reward. How much money can I generate from this business if I follow the program that I'm buying into? And so that financial return, or your ROI, is a really important thing to take into consideration that Entrepreneur Magazine does not take into consideration. Okay. And then your goals and your skill set are not anywhere on this list. Nowhere in their criteria do they say anything about your goals and your skill set, which would honestly be impossible, right? You're you, someone else is them. How are we going to know what your goals are and what your skill set are comparatively to somebody else that's looking at buying a franchise, and then take all of that data and plug it in to create the perfect list? So is this a good list? Is the Franchise 500 a good list? I would say, yeah, it's a good list. If they're true to themselves, if they're true to what their criteria are, they're not persuaded by big PR firms. I'm not saying they are. Just saying if they are not, then yes, this is a good list. And it is a list that we should use as a piece of the puzzle when trying to figure out which franchise is best for you. But it's not gospel. Okay, this is not the gospel. This is not God-breathed. This came from fallible man. Right? They've got a list that they put out. And let's just be honest, every list has its biases. Okay? Every list has its biases. For example, if you're an advertiser and you spend tens of thousands of dollars, when I was the VP of franchise development for a franchisor, we had a full page ad in Entrepreneur Magazine. It was the issue with Mark Wahlberg on it. He was talking about his F45 fitness franchise. Thought it made a lot of sense to have a full-page ad in that issue of the magazine, and we did that. That one full-page ad was $20,000. One time, one full-page ad, $20,000. Okay, think about the advertisers in their magazine that are in there monthly, plus plastered all over their website. And now think. Is it really possible to be completely neutral when looking at these numbers? I don't know. I have no insider information whatsoever. Making sure I'm making that very clear to you all. But it's something you need to think about when looking at this list. And if you're not seeing a franchise that you think speaks to you on this list, don't let it dissuade you from buying it. I mean, do your due diligence, but like we said before, this is not gospel. This is a certain segment of people's opinions of what the best franchises are out there based on the data points that we talked about. Okay, so how should we use the list then? How should we use this list? I'm going to tell you right now, use the list for what it is. It is a relatively subjective ranking, fairly arbitrarily built, that should just give you some inspiration when looking for the right franchise. Right? Use it the way, because it's formatted really well. Get on their website, entrepreneur.com/franchise500, and just scroll down. You see them all. They're right there with the logos and everything. Tells you the cost, gives you a range. Use that at least as maybe a jumping off point. Okay? But don't use it for anything else. Use it for inspiration. Don't use it for affirmation. Okay? Inspiration. This is not for affirmation, because it's irrelevant if the franchise you want is on there. Doesn't matter whatsoever. And I'll tell you why here again. We'll get a little bit more into it here in a moment. And then once you're done looking at that list, talk to a qualified franchise consultant, somebody who's neutral, who has your best interest at heart. Okay, neutral with regard to the franchise industry, not neutral with you. Somebody that you feel like you can trust. Somebody who gets you. Somebody who asks you some decent questions. Asks you about your goals. What your lifestyle and financial goals are. And that person, if they're worth anything, should be able to help you to narrow your search down and point you in the right direction towards the franchise that can give you exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so that's it. Use the list to get it, just a kind of a brief overview of some of the franchises that are available, but don't use it for gospel. Talk to a qualified franchise consultant after that, and then leave the list behind. Okay, so I said I was going to circle back around here. So when we talked about how many franchises there exist versus how many franchises are on the list, right? There's about a 10% of the overall franchise world ends up on this list, okay? So it's a pretty exclusive list. But when you start learning a little bit more about how they put this together, we said before, you have to apply. Last year, they had a record number of franchises apply. They had 1,300 and some odd franchises, about 1,380, I think, franchises apply to be on the list. Those 1,300 franchises had to actively want to be on this list. And there's a number of franchises out there that, number one, don't even know that the list exists or care at all because they're too busy running their business, right? They're too busy trying to grow their business. They're not into the PR thing. Because really what this is the franchise industry's senior superlatives. Makes them feel good, makes them feel warm and fuzzy, helps them maybe sell a couple franchises, helps them recruit some folks to be on their team, right, their executive team. If they got some of these prestigious lists, Glassdoor publishes the list of best places to work, right? It's a good list to be on if you want to attract some employees. But it's not necessarily going to help the employees make the right decision, because how you get on that list at Glassdoor? You apply and you pay. So, spoiler alert to anybody who's using that as their litmus test about where they should go work. That's how it works, okay? And when I was a VP of franchise development for a home service franchise, we actually landed on this list. And I was pretty proud of ourselves for doing it. All right, we're 3 years in to franchising, and it's an uphill battle, man. When you're a franchisor, it's the Wild West, especially when you're franchising a new industry inside of an industry that is really yet untapped. It's really difficult. You make a lot of mistakes. You don't really know backwards from forwards. You don't know what you don't know until you don't know it, right? And so it's very difficult to get any real sense of direction and traction, especially early on. And so when we applied to be on that, because I applied every year that we were a franchise, even before we had a single franchisee, I knew I wanted to apply to be on that thing because I like the senior superlative element to it. Bragging rights, you can put a logo on your website, you can send out an email blast to all your database. It's a good thing, but we got on it, okay? And were we the greatest franchise in the world? No, Were we a good one? Yeah, of course, for the right person. We were, I think, number 142, 144, somewhere in that neighborhood. And if somebody was scrolling through that, and I'll give you the kind of breakdown here. If somebody was scrolling through that and they hit number 142, they saw us. Our investment was somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200,000, 232,000, and they looked at that and they saw, okay, I've got that amount of money, or I can borrow up to that amount of money, and this is what I want to do because Entrepreneur Magazine told me that this is a great franchise. They clicked on it, they submitted a lead form, went to us, we called them up, and we sold them a franchise. Let's say we didn't do our jobs at all, we didn't do any vetting whatsoever. But this person had no acumen for running that type of business. It doesn't matter if we're number 142. They're going to fail. They are going to fail, and they're going to fail tremendously because they didn't have those other boxes on the right side of our sheet here. If you were taking notes, which again, I don't know why you would take notes, but I did. On the right-hand side of my sheet, I had the other criteria that were the most important, which were lifestyle, financial return, and your goals, and skill set. If they just looked at it sight unseen and thought this was a good opportunity because Entrepreneur Magazine told them it was a good opportunity, that would have been a mistake. And that's how you're supposed to use this list. So, before we wrap up, let's go through the top 10. Number 1 for the 4th year in a row is Taco Bell. Taco Bell. Who wants to own a Taco Bell franchise out there? Give us a call. We'll try to talk you out of it. Jersey Mike's Subs. If you want to own a Jersey Mike's Subs, again, call us up. We'll try to talk you out of it. Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen. Yeah, Shaquille O'Neal owns a handful of those, right? Must be good. Yeah, it must be good if you can buy 20 or 30 at a time. Yeah, it's great. It's absolutely great. You got a team and an infrastructure in place to operate a business like that you don't have to really go in there and dipping chicken in the deep fryer and wearing a hairnet. Then yeah, it's perfect because they make money. And if you got 37 to 40 million bucks and you can buy 10 of them, it will stack on top of each other. It'll make a lot of money for you. UPS stores, number 4. Right? UPS stores, necessary. Lots of business coming in from Amazon returns, right? Kind of a no-brainer type business. You open it up, it is going to work no matter what. As long as you're in a fairly decent location, that business is going to be profitable and work. The issue, again, as we mentioned before, number 4, which I said earlier, that's the number 4 that I was talking about, the UPS store. The lifestyle can be a little tricky unless you have the ability to own multiple units. And the reason being is that your profitability isn't high enough to hire a general manager to oversee it. Someone who you're going to have to pay him a decent amount of money because it's a big job. And so a lot of these franchisees are owner operators, meaning they work in the business full time, and they're able to take home, on average. I don't want to do a financial performance representation, so I won't. But they take home a decent earning wage. And they're building equity, and a lot of people want to buy these things. I talk to a lot of people who want to own UPS stores. Again, I sometimes try to dissuade them if they don't check the boxes on the lifestyle, financial return, and goals. If it doesn't match them, then we will try our best to talk them out of it. Ace Hardware is number 5. Ace Hardware, by the way, great franchise, absolutely great franchise. Really good support. They allow for a lot of autonomy. They give a lot of people a lot of flexibility in the marketplace, kind of make it their own. Right? They can sell things like locally produced things. Maybe somebody has a small hobby farm and they want to sell some of their stuff out of there. They're allowed to do that. They can do a lot of really neat stuff in that franchise without kind of those corporate restrictions that exist in a lot of the other big brands that are out there. All right, Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin', it's what you're called now, but Dunkin' Donuts, you know what that is. Number 6. Again, if you've ever met somebody who owned a Dunkin' Donuts before, it's like owning a boat. Right? It's the 2 best days where you own a Dunkin' Donuts are the day you buy it and the day you sell it. I'm kidding, Dunkin'. Don't send me a cease and desist. It's great. Good coffee, great donuts. I like those little sandwiches too. You ever had those, like the the little wraps, like a tortilla, a little piece of cheese, American cheese on there with an egg. Those things are delicious. Plus the little munchkins. I love them. Culver's is number 7. Again, Culver's, they're a big Midwest brand. They're really starting to branch out a little bit more further south and further west. A cool brand, good culture, can be very profitable. Comes with a big price tag, 2.5 to 7.2 million to get one open. It's one of the more expensive ones on the list, at least on the top 10. Followed up by number 8, the single most expensive one on the list is $12.8 million is the minimum investment, all the way up to $24.1 million to open up a Hampton by Hilton. So if you want to own a hotel, know a guy who owned one of these. He was looking at buying a home service franchise to kind of subsidize his wealth creation vehicle because, yes, it is can be a big money maker and build a lot of equity in there, but with that big price tag comes also high overhead, and it takes a long time to get that investment back. So you better be liquid, you better be substantially well capitalized in order to own one of those types of franchises. But with the right management team in place, it can be a good lifestyle business for you as well. And we're talking to the top 0.1% of the population that could even think about owning a Hampton by Hilton. Arby's is number 9 on the list, $645,000 to $2.5 million to get an Arby's open. I love Arby's. Love Arby's. They have the meats. They got the meats. And this is a side note here, but the show Baskets. Have you ever seen the show Baskets? The Arby's makes a pretty heavy appearance in that show. Louis Anderson plays the mom, which is hilarious. Of Zach Galifianakis, he plays 2 different people. They're twins. Chip and Dale were their names in the show. And her life goal was to own an Arby's. And cute show, cute premise. And it could be right for the right person. Right? There's nothing wrong with any of these. It's got to be right for the right person. And then Kumon is number 10 with the lowest investment out of the top 10, $68,000 to $147,000 initial investment. Now, like we said before, none of those, it doesn't really take into consideration anything other than the 5 data points we talked about. So that's the list. Those are the top 10. Those are some of my thoughts on the top 10. Nothing wrong with any of them, but they're definitely not right for everyone. And I'll give you another thing before we wrap up here today. So my top 5 for people who are like me. Okay, this is what I look at when I look at these things. If I'm going to judge things, I obviously first have to use my lens. So the top 5 franchises that I believe would be the ones I would go with, you'd have to get to number 200 before you even found my top 5. Okay, that made the list. Keep that in mind. I'm not going off script here. I'm not saying the ones that just exist. I'm saying the top 5 of the 500 that are on this list, you'd get to number 200 before you got to my top 5. Now, to get to my top 5 out of the entire universe of franchises, none of my top 5 are on here. Not a single one made the list. Golly, I must suck at making lists. But that goes to show you how subjective it is. Anyway, that's the Franchise 500. I'm going to be done talking here. We talked long enough. I appreciate you for listening. If you want any more information on the Franchise 500, hit up entrepreneur.com/franchise500. Go to RevFran, REVFRAN.com if you want to learn more about what we have to offer. We provide a free service to help folks like you find the right franchise out of all of the different 5,000 franchises out there. And we're confident if you got some money, you don't need a lot. By the way, I don't want to scare you off with the top 10 list. By the way, one more thing. $1.8 million to $4.7 million is the average initial investment range for the entire top 10. If you take the entire top 10, average it out, $1.8 to $4.7 million. If you're not a millionaire, you cannot buy any of these franchises, except for Kumon. If you're not already a millionaire, don't even try to buy any of these franchises. Okay? Keep that in mind. But if you got like 20,000 bucks, preferably a little bit higher. We talked about that before. Let's call it 25. Stick to what I said before. If you got $25,000 sitting in an account somewhere earmarked, that was your Sledgehammer account. If you remember the last episode, your Sledgehammer account has $25,000 in it. Hit up our website, fill out the form on that, and we'll be happy to help you out because you can afford to exit your job and get into a career or wealth building vehicle in a franchise that could be highly profitable and likely more profitable than any of them that are on the top 10 of the Franchise 500. And I won't rest until I find that for you. Okay? And by the way, those 5 that I mentioned earlier, you can qualify for all 5 of them for 25,000 bucks. Pique your interest enough? Hit up our website, fill it out, give us a call, do whatever you need to do. Reach out to us. Thanks for listening. Catch us on the next one. Be excellent.